Chosen one, stop. Right there. Don't you dare scroll past this moment. Why have you been crying yourself to sleep at 3 a.m., asking God if He's forgotten your name? Why does your heart carry a weight that others never seem to feel? Why, when everyone else appears to glide through life with ease, do you feel like you're walking through quicksand with invisible chains around your ankles? There's a reason your life has been harder than most. There's a reason the battles came early and never seemed to end. There's a reason you felt different, set apart, misunderstood, since you were old enough to think. And tonight, this very moment, heaven is about to reveal what hell has been desperately trying to hide from you. You weren't born to struggle without purpose. You weren't marked for pain without reason. What if I told you that every tear you've shed in secret, every betrayal that cut you to the bone, every door that slammed in your face when you were just trying to be faithful, what if all of it was preparation, not punishment? Heaven pressed pause on your timeline just for this moment. This message didn't find you, you were guided here. The restlessness in your spirit, the stirring you can't explain, the sense that something massive is shifting around you that's not your imagination, that's recognition. Your soul recognizing that what you're about to hear will shatter every lie the enemy has whispered about your identity. You've been asking the wrong question. You've been asking, why me, when heaven has been answering. Because you were chosen. Not today, not last week, not when things got hard. You were chosen before time touched the earth, before stars knew their names, before your first heartbeat echoed in your mother's womb. Before we go deeper into this sacred unveiling, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating. You're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let the Holy Spirit lead your heart. Here's what the enemy never wanted you to discover. You were never meant to fit in. You were designed to stand out. The isolation wasn't rejection, it was divine separation. The warfare wasn't random, it was strategic. Hell recognized what heaven placed in you before you ever knew it existed. Tonight, we reveal the hidden truth that will explain everything. Why your life has carried so much weight when others walked freely. Why you've survived what should have destroyed you. Why you're still here, still breathing, still believing against all odds. If you feel this word tugging at your spirit, don't stay silent. Say out loud, I am chosen. Write it, declare it, seal it. Because tonight, heaven is watching. And what you discover about yourself will change everything you thought you knew about your purpose on this earth. The veil is about to be lifted. Your true identity is about to be revealed. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever be the same again. Why does your soul ache in rooms full of people? Why do you carry conversations that drain you while others seem energized? Why has every step forward in your life felt like you're walking uphill in a hurricane while watching others stroll on level ground? Listen to me carefully, dear one. That weight you've been carrying isn't a curse. It's a calling card from heaven itself. You see, there's something the enemy has been desperately trying to hide from you for decades. Every attack that came early in your life, every betrayal that cut deeper than it should have, every loss that left you gasping for air, none of it was random. Hell doesn't waste ammunition on ordinary targets. The enemy doesn't deploy his finest weapons against people who pose no threat to his kingdom. But you've been in his crosshairs since you took your first breath. Think about Joseph, thrown into a pit by his own brothers at 17, sold like livestock, falsely accused by his master's wife, forgotten in prison for years. The very people who should have protected him became his persecutors. Sound familiar? That young man carried the weight of divine destiny, while everyone around him saw only a dreamer who talked too much. But here's what Joseph's brothers didn't know, and what your betrayers couldn't see. That pit wasn't Joseph's grave, it was his training ground. Every injustice was building something inside him that comfort never could. Character that could handle running Egypt's economy. Wisdom that could save nations from famine. Forgiveness that could heal fractured families. The weight wasn't his punishment. It was his preparation. Consider David, forgotten in the fields while his brothers stood before the prophet Samuel. His own father didn't even think to call him when God was choosing the next king of Israel. Overlooked, dismissed, written off as insignificant. Yet while they stood in ceremonies, David was in solitude, learning to hear God's voice above the noise of sheep and storms. Years later, when giants threatened God's people, it wasn't the celebrated brothers who stepped forward. It was the forgotten shepherd boy who had learned in the wilderness that the Lord was his shepherd too. The weight of rejection had forged a warrior who could face Goliath without flinching. And what about Esther? An orphan girl, parents dead, raised by her cousin in a foreign land, hidden away from the royal court until the very moment when her people needed deliverance. She carried the weight of an entire nation's survival on her shoulders, a weight that would have crushed someone who hadn't been strengthened by years of anonymity and preparation. For such a time as this, Mordecai told her. Not for such a time as when it's convenient, not for such a time as when you feel ready, but for such a time as this when the weight you've carried finally reveals its purpose. Moses knew this weight too. 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, 40 years forgotten in the wilderness, watching sheep and wondering if he'd missed his moment. But Exodus 2:11 tells us something profound. When Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He felt their pain before he was called to their deliverance. Every year in that desert wasn't wasted time. It was God installing something in Moses that palace life never could: humility, dependence, and the unshakable knowledge that deliverance doesn't come from human strength but from divine intervention. Now look at your own story with new eyes. Those nights you cried until you had no tears left, that wasn't abandonment. That was heaven collecting every drop in bottles of remembrance. Those betrayals that left you questioning everyone's motives, that wasn't cruelty. That was God developing discernment that would protect you from future deception. That depression that felt like drowning, that was your soul being emptied of everything that wasn't eternal so it could be filled with what is. That anxiety that kept you awake at 3 a.m., that was your spirit groaning for a purpose bigger than your circumstances. The enemy attacked you early because he saw what you would become if you ever woke up. He knew that someone who survives betrayal without becoming bitter carries healing for other broken hearts. He recognized that a person who endures rejection without losing faith becomes a lighthouse for those lost in storms of doubt. He understood that those who are pressed but not crushed, struck down but not destroyed, carry oil that can't be manufactured, only produced through divine pressure. 2 Corinthians 4:17 declares, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." What feels heavy in time is producing weight in eternity. What seems overwhelming in your flesh is building overwhelming authority in your spirit. You've been asking God why you had to carry so much when others carried so little. But tonight, the answer is becoming clear. You weren't carrying burdens. You were carrying building materials. Every trial was a brick. Every tear was mortar. Every sleepless night was foundation work for something magnificent that heaven is about to construct through your surrendered life. The weight you've carried has qualified you for assignments that the comfortable could never handle. The pain you've processed has given you access to hearts that surface-level ministry could never reach. The valley of shadows you've walked through has become a furnace that burned away everything false and left only gold. Your scars aren't marks of failure. They're prophetic ink, writing a story of resilience that will inspire generations you'll never meet. If this word hits you deep, let heaven see your agreement. Type "I receive" so darkness knows you're still standing, still believing, still carrying the weight that's about to become your wings. Because what you've endured has been building towards something greater than you can imagine. The weight is about to lift, but not because it's being removed, because you're finally strong enough to carry it with the authority it was always meant to produce. And that transformation begins now. You know what breaks my heart about you, chosen one? It's not the battles you've fought. It's not even the tears you've cried in secret. What breaks my heart is that you've been apologizing for something that was never your fault. You've been apologizing for feeling different, for not fitting in, for carrying a weight in your chest that others never seem to feel. You've been saying I'm sorry for the very thing that proves you were marked by heaven before you took your first breath. That loneliness that's followed you since childhood. That feeling of being on the outside looking in, even in your own family. That ache in your soul that whispers, I don't belong here. Dear one, that wasn't rejection, that was recognition. Your spirit recognizing that this world was never meant to be your home. Let me ask you something that might cut deep. How many family gatherings have you sat through, surrounded by people who share your blood, yet feeling like a stranger? How many times have you looked around the dinner table and thought, these people don't understand me at all? How many nights have you lain in bed, even with your spouse sleeping right beside you, feeling utterly, completely alone? You thought something was wrong with you, but what if I told you that feeling was actually something sacred stirring inside you? Think about Jesus. 30 years. 30 years of silence before 3 years that shook eternity. Do you think those 30 years were wasted? Do you think the Son of God was just killing time in Nazareth, waiting for his real life to begin? No, beloved. Those years weren't delay. They were divine preparation. Heaven was forming something in the silence that the noise could never produce. The same Jesus who would later walk on water and raise the dead spent 3 decades learning the rhythm of ordinary days. But here's what most people miss. He was never ordinary. Even in the silence, he was sacred. Even in the waiting, he was holy. Even in the hiddenness, he was the hope of the world. That's you, chosen one. Even in your isolation, you've been sacred. Even in your silence, you've been significant. Even in your hiddenness, you've been heaven's hope for this generation. David understood this mystery. While his brothers were invited to feast with the prophet Samuel, David was forgotten in the fields with the sheep. 1 Samuel 16:11 tells us that when Samuel asked if these were all of Jesse's sons, the father said, "There remains yet the youngest, and behold, he is keeping the sheep." David was so overlooked, his own father didn't think to call him when God's prophet came looking for the next king. But God wasn't looking in the palace. He was looking in the pasture. He wasn't seeking someone who already had a platform. He was searching for someone who had learned to worship with only sheep as witnesses. Every morning David walked out to those fields. Do you think he felt forgotten? Do you think he wondered why his life was so quiet while his brothers seemed to have all the adventure? But those fields weren't his prison. They were his classroom. Every lion he fought taught him courage. Every bear he killed taught him that God's power works through ordinary hands. Every psalm he sang to sleeping sheep was preparing him to sing over sleeping nations. You've been in your own field, haven't you? While others seem to get the promotions, the recognition, the opportunities, you've been tending things nobody else wanted to tend. Caring for aging parents while your siblings were building careers. Working jobs that paid the bills but never fed your soul. Staying faithful in a marriage that felt more like a mission field than a partnership. But Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him from a burning bush. 40 years. That's longer than most people's entire careers. The man who would deliver Israel from bondage spent 4 decades shepherding sheep in silence. Exodus 3:1 simply says, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro." One verse to cover 40 years of obscurity. But those weren't wasted years, they were wilderness university. Every day Moses learned to lead sheep, prepared him to lead people. Every night he spent under the desert stars taught him to trust the God who hung them there. Every morning he chose faithfulness in the mundane, was building the character he'd need for the magnificent. And Joseph. Oh, chosen one, if you've ever felt buried alive, think about Joseph. Genesis 39-20 tells us Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. From favorite son to slave to prisoner, from dreams of ruling to reality of chains. But even in the dungeon, Scripture says the Lord was with Joseph. Not the Lord felt sorry for Joseph. Not the Lord visited Joseph occasionally. The Lord was with Joseph. In the pit. In the palace of Potiphar. In the prison. The presence of God doesn't abandon you in isolation. It intensifies. Here's what hell never wanted you to understand. You weren't rejected. You were protected. What felt like absence was divine preservation. While others were networking their way to the top, God was shielding you from contamination. While they were building platforms, He was building your character. While they were collecting followers, He was teaching you to follow His voice above the noise of the crowd. That silence you've endured wasn't punishment, it was purification. Every no that broke your heart was heaven saying, "Not yet, because what I have for you is bigger than what you're asking for." Every door that closed was God redirecting you toward the one He'd been preparing since before time began. You've been wondering when your season of hiddenness would end, but what if I told you it already has? What if I told you that the very fact you're hearing these words right now is evidence that your emergence has begun? What if I told you that the mantle you've been prepared to carry, the crown you've been refined to wear, the breakthrough you've been positioned to walk in, what if it's all closer than you think? But first, you must understand why the preparation had to be so intense, why the refining had to go so deep, why the testing had to last so long. Because what God is about to release through you isn't just for you. It's for a generation that's been waiting for someone exactly like you to rise up and show them what authentic faith looks like in impossible times. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. That breakdown you had 3 years ago when everything fell apart, that wasn't your destruction. That was your coronation ceremony. The fire that nearly consumed you, it wasn't sent to finish you, it was sent to forge you into something this world has never seen before. You've been calling it suffering. Heaven calls it sculpting. Right now, you're sitting there thinking about that season when the doctor's words echoed in sterile hallways, when your spouse walked out after 37 years, when your retirement savings evaporated overnight, when your own children stopped calling. You've been carrying shame about those moments, haven't you? Wondering what you did wrong. Questioning if God abandoned you in your darkest hour. But what if I told you that every single flame that licked your life was precisely measured by the hand of the Almighty? What if that furnace you thought was your grave was actually your birthing chamber? Job understood this mystery when he declared in Job 23:10, "But He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Job didn't say if He tested me. He said, when. Because fire isn't the exception for the chosen, it's the requirement. You see, dear one, God doesn't put diamonds under streetlights. He buries them 2 miles underground, under crushing pressure, in suffocating darkness, for thousands of years. And when they finally emerge, they don't just reflect light, they fracture it into rainbows that dance across cathedral walls. That's what happened to you in that fire. You didn't just survive, you were transformed into something that fractures ordinary light into supernatural radiance. But here's what breaks my heart. You've been apologizing for your scars. You've been hiding the very marks that prove you've been kissed by divine fire. Those aren't blemishes, beloved. Those are holy seals. Evidence that you've been where others fear to go and live to tell about it. Think about Jesus after the resurrection. When He appeared to His disciples, what did He show them first? His wounds. Luke 24:39 records Him saying, "Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself." He didn't hide His scars. He displayed them like credentials from heaven's academy of suffering. Your scars aren't your shame. They're your signature from the Most High. Every bankruptcy taught you that God is your true provider. Every betrayal revealed who you could really trust. Every diagnosis forced you to depend on supernatural strength. Every loss showed you what could never be taken. The fire didn't destroy you. It revealed the indestructible core that was always there. But I need to ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many more years are you going to waste being ashamed of what God used to anoint you? How many more conversations are you going to have where you minimize your testimony because you think your pain disqualifies you? Your pain is precisely what qualifies you. The enemy wants you to believe that your trials were evidence of God's absence, but every flame that touched your life was proof of his presence. He didn't abandon you to the fire, he joined you in it. And when the 3 Hebrew boys walked out of Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, the Bible says they didn't even smell like smoke. The only thing the fire destroyed was their bondage. What bondage did your fire destroy? What chains melted in that heat? What lies were incinerated in those flames? You thought the fire was meant to finish you, but it was meant to free you. You weren't burned. You were branded, marked, sealed, set apart for such a time as this. 1 Peter 1-7 declares that your trials have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Greater worth than gold. That's what your refined faith carries. That's why your prayers hit different now. That's why your worship carries weight. That's why your voice has authority that makes demons tremble and hearts mend. You didn't just read about God's faithfulness, you lived it. You didn't just hear about his strength, you experienced it, holding you when your own gave out. The fire crowned you with something no seminary could teach, no diploma could grant, no title could bestow. You were crowned with the authority of the tested, the oil of the afflicted, the wisdom of the wounded who chose to worship anyway. If you believe you've been crowned in the fire, say it with me: I am still standing. I am still chosen. Write 444 inch, the comments, heaven's number of fire refined, because your ashes are about to become your altar and your scars are about to become your sermon. The world needs to see what happens when someone walks through hell and comes out carrying heaven's fire. That someone is you, chosen one. You've been through the furnace, and now it's time to light up the darkness with the flame that couldn't be extinguished. But the question that will determine your impact is this: will you finally stop hiding the very thing that makes you powerful? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. That restlessness you've been feeling, that deep ache in your chest that won't go away, that's not anxiety, that's not depression. That's the sound of a mantle descending from heaven itself. You've been walking around for months, maybe years, feeling like nothing fits anymore. The job that once excited you now feels like a prison. The conversations that used to spark joy now leave you empty, hollow, desperate for something real. You sit in restaurants and wonder why everyone else seems content with small talk while your soul is screaming for purpose. That's because the mantle on you is too heavy for small spaces. You think you're going through a midlife crisis. You think you're just getting old and losing your mind. But what if I told you that what you're experiencing is exactly what Elisha felt when Elijah's mantle was about to fall? What if this restlessness isn't breakdown, it's breakthrough? 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 15 records it perfectly. The spirit of Elijah rests upon Elisha. But here's what they don't tell you in Sunday school. That mantle wasn't a gentle gift. It was a divine disruption. It changed everything about how Elisha moved through the world. The same thing is happening to you right now. You've been chosen to carry something that most people can't even see, let alone understand. That's why your family looks at you strangely when you talk about the things burning in your heart. That's why your old friends have slowly drifted away. That's why you feel like an alien in your own life. The mantle is descending, and it's forcing everything that doesn't belong to fall away. But here's what terrifies me about this moment. Here's what keeps me awake at night praying for people just like you. Most people run from the mantle. They feel the weight coming, and they panic. They think something's wrong with them, instead of understanding that something's finally right. They medicate the anointing. They therapy away the calling. They numb themselves back into normalcy rather than stepping into the supernatural authority God is trying to place on their shoulders. Don't you dare do that. That mantle falling on you isn't a burden, it's a weapon. It's not meant to crush you, it's meant to equip you for the battles ahead. The enemy has seen what's about to rest on your life, and he's absolutely terrified. Why do you think the attacks intensified lately? Why do you think everything started falling apart right when you began to sense God moving? Because hell recognizes a mantle bearer before they even know what they're carrying. You want to know why Elijah's mantle had power? Because it cost him everything. He spent years in the wilderness, years of loneliness, years of being misunderstood, years of carrying weight that others couldn't comprehend. But when that mantle finally passed to Elisha, it carried the authority of someone who had been tested by fire. Your testing is almost over. Every sleepless night you've endured, every tear you've cried in secret, every moment you wanted to quit but didn't, every time you chose obedience over comfort, every betrayal that should have broken you but only made you stronger. It was all preparation for this moment when heaven says, "Now you're ready." The mantle isn't coming because you're perfect. It's coming because you're proven. But I need to warn you about something that will shock you to your core. This mantle doesn't make life easier. It makes you responsible. It doesn't bring comfort. It brings authority. And authority always comes with opposition. When Elisha received that mantle, his first miracle was parting the Jordan River. But notice what happened next. People began coming to him with problems they couldn't solve, desperate situations that required supernatural intervention. The mantle made him a target for everyone who needed a miracle. Are you ready for that level of responsibility? Because once this mantle settles on your shoulders, you can't take it off. You can't return it. You can't pretend you don't have it. People will sense something different about you, even when you're trying to blend in. Your presence will carry weight. Your words will have power. Your prayers will move mountains. This isn't just inspiration, chosen one. This is impartation. Right now, as these words wash over your spirit, something is shifting in the heavenly realm. Angels are positioning themselves around your life. Demonic assignments are being reassigned away from you. Your name is being spoken in the councils of heaven. The mantle has fallen. The only question is, will you wear it? I can feel some of you trying to talk yourselves out of this moment. I'm not qualified. I'm too broken. I've made too many mistakes. But that's exactly why you're perfect for this. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And your scars aren't disqualifications, they're your credentials. The world is waiting for someone who's been through hell and came out carrying heaven's fire. They don't need perfection, they need proof that God still moves in impossible situations. If you feel that mantle descending even now, if something in your chest is rising up in holy recognition, don't you dare shrink back. Say it aloud. No more delay, no more doubt. I receive the mantle, because what happens next will determine not just your destiny, but the destinies of everyone God is about to send through your life. Listen to me, chosen one. Time is not your friend right now. Every second you hesitate, every moment you convince yourself tomorrow will be better, every night you lay your head on that pillow without answering God's call, you're not just delaying your destiny, you're dancing with spiritual death. How long will you waver between two opinions? The prophet Elijah stood before the people of Israel and thundered these words in 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 21. How long? How many more sunrises will you waste? How many more opportunities will you let slip through your fingers like sand? You think you have time? You think because you're 70, 80, 90 years old that somehow God's patience with you is infinite. But let me shatter that comfortable lie right now. God's mercy is infinite, yes, but His opportunities? They have expiration dates. Look around you. How many of your friends took their dreams to the grave? How many people in your generation whispered on their deathbeds, I should have, I could have, I wish I had? They had the same stirring in their spirit that you feel right now. They heard the same voice calling them forward. But they chose comfort over calling. They chose safety over surrender. And now they're gone. And their assignments, their divine purposes, they died with them. Margaret from Wisconsin, 83 years old, finally started that prayer ministry she'd been feeling called to for 40 years. 40 years. She thought she was too old, too set in her ways. But in her final 5 years, she led 17 people to Christ and broke generational curses over 6 families. 5 years of obedience erased 40 years of regret. But what about Thomas from Michigan? He felt called to reconcile with his estranged son for 26 years. 26 years of God tugging at his heart. Tomorrow, he'd say. Next week, when I feel stronger. His son died in a car accident last spring. Thomas is 89 now, and that phone call will never be made. That forgiveness will never be spoken. That healing will never come. The difference between Margaret and Thomas: one word: obedience. You see, the enemy's greatest weapon against seniors isn't sickness. It isn't loneliness. It's the lie that says your season of significance is over. That God only uses young people for big things, that your time has passed. Moses was 80 when the burning bush blazed before him. 80. When Pharaoh should have seen a tired old shepherd, he faced the deliverer of nations. When the Israelites should have followed a young warrior, they marched behind a man whose hair was white as snow, but whose calling burned like fire. Don't let age trick you into thinking God is finished with you. Don't let the calendar convince you that your greatest chapters are behind you. The God who called Moses at 80 is the same God stirring your spirit at 75, at 85, at 95. But here's the terrifying truth nobody wants to tell you. Delay is not denial, but delay can become disobedience. And disobedience has a cost, a real cost, a generational cost. Every day you postpone that phone call, God's been pressing on your heart. That's another day your grandchild grows up without knowing their worth. Every week you silence that voice telling you to speak truth to your family. That's another week. Demonic patterns strengthen their grip on your bloodline. Every month you ignore that assignment burning in your bones. That's another month someone somewhere stays trapped in the very prison you hold the key to unlock. Your obedience isn't just about you anymore. It never was. You're carrying the prayers of ancestors who died believing God would raise up someone in their lineage who would finally say yes. You're holding the hopes of descendants not yet born who need you to break the cycles that have held your family captive for generations. The urgency you feel isn't stress. It's the Spirit of God saying, now. Now is the time. Now is the hour. Because windows close, seasons shift, opportunities expire. Esther had a moment. One moment to speak up or watch her people perish. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Mordecai didn't say maybe someday or when you feel ready. He said such a time as this time, this moment, this hour. This is your Esther moment. This is your burning bush. This is your road to Damascus. The chariot is moving, and you can either climb on or watch it disappear over the horizon. Stop making excuses. Stop negotiating with God. Stop asking for signs when He's already spoken. The stirring in your chest, that's your sign. The restlessness in your spirit, that's your confirmation. The fact that these words are cutting through your soul like a sword, that's heaven saying, move. How many more sermons will you hear before you act? How many more confirmations do you need? How many more nights will you lie awake knowing exactly what God has called you to do, yet choosing the comfort of inaction over the cost of obedience? The graveyard is full of people who intended to obey. The cemetery is packed with souls who plan to say yes tomorrow. But tomorrow never came, and their purposes were buried with their procrastination. Right now, not after this video, not tomorrow morning, not next week, right now. Write it. Say it out loud. Declare it to heaven and hell. No more delay. No more hesitation. I choose obedience. Because the God who has waited 70 years for your yes won't wait forever. And the question that will haunt eternity is this: when your moment comes, will you be ready to answer? Or will you still be getting ready to get ready? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What I'm about to unveil will shatter everything you thought you knew about your story. You've been living with a question that haunts you in the quiet hours. God, why has my life been so hard? You've watched others coast through decades while you've crawled through broken glass just to survive another day. You've wondered if you're cursed, if you're being punished, if somehow you drew the short straw in life's lottery. But what if I told you that every single thing you've endured was not random suffering, it was divine strategy? The Bible declares in Jeremiah 1-5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Set apart, not set aside, not forgotten. Set apart for a purpose so specific, so crucial, that heaven had to prepare you through fire. Your isolation was alignment. While others were building shallow networks, God was pulling you away to build deep roots. While they were collecting followers, you were learning to follow His voice alone. That loneliness you felt, that wasn't abandonment, that was divine appointment. God was aligning you to His frequency, away from the noise of the world that would have drowned out His whisper. Think about Moses. 40 years in the wilderness before God called him at age 80. 40 years of feeling forgotten, overlooked, past his prime. But God wasn't punishing Moses. He was preparing him, because the man who would split the Red Sea needed to know what it felt like when everything around you is dry, lifeless, impossible. Your fire was a coronation. Every trial that should have broken you only proved you were made of different material. The depression that tried to drown you, you're still breathing. The betrayal that should have made you bitter, your heart is still tender. The financial devastation that should have destroyed your faith, you're still tithing with your last dollar. 1 Peter 1-7 tells us, "These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold." You weren't being burned up, you were being refined. Every flame was removing what couldn't go with you into your destiny. And now you carry an authority that can't be faked, bought, or borrowed. You've been crowned in the furnace. Your mantle is your authorization. This weight you've carried on your shoulders, it's not a burden, it's a badge of office. Elijah's mantle didn't fall on someone who lived in comfort. It fell on Elisha, who was plowing fields, working with his hands, understanding what it meant to labor for harvest. You've been plowing generational ground that others were too weak to break. You've been the one in your family who wouldn't repeat the cycles, wouldn't accept the dysfunction, wouldn't pass down the poison. And that mantle of deliverance, it's resting on you right now, and your obedience is the doorway. But here's the shocking truth that will leave you breathless. You are not merely a survivor, you are a generational disruptor. Your scars are scrolls of prophecy. Every wound tells a story of what God preserved you through. Your existence itself is a divine interruption in family bloodlines. The addiction that claimed your father, it stops with you. The poverty that haunted your grandparents, it ends with your generation. The silence that covered abuse, you're the voice that breaks it. Look at your hands. Those aren't just hands that have worked, suffered, endured. Those are the hands that Isaiah 61-3 speaks of, hands appointed to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. You think you're too old? Abraham was 75 when God called him to father nations. You think you're too broken? David was an adulterer and murderer, yet called a man after God's own heart. You think you've missed your moment? Anna the prophetess was 84 when she finally saw the Messiah. Your timing isn't late, it's prophetic. Here's the revelation that will rock your world. Hell feared your awakening. From the moment you drew breath, darkness knew what you carried. That's why the attacks came early. That's why the warfare was so intense. That's why everything that tried to destroy you hit with such force. But heaven preserved your crown. Through every valley, every betrayal, Every moment you wanted to quit. The crown that was placed on your head before time began never moved. You may not have felt royal, but you never stopped being royal. And now the truth unfolds. You were not just born, you were sent for such a time as this. Esther 4:14 asks the question that echoes across eternity. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? This isn't about your comfort. This isn't about your timeline. This is about a generation that's drowning in darkness and needs someone who has walked through their own night and found the light. The children in your community who are contemplating suicide need to see that someone who has been in that pit is still standing. The families trapped in generational bondage need to witness that chains can be broken. The elderly in nursing homes who feel forgotten need to know that their latter days can be their greatest days. If this message found you, it's because heaven marked this moment. The restlessness you've been feeling, the stirring that wakes you at 3 a.m., the sense that something massive is shifting, that's the sound of your assignment activating. Declare your awakening. Write, I am chosen. I will rise. I receive it. And share this so another chosen one can find their crown. Because the world isn't waiting for your perfection, it's waiting for your obedience. And your time is not coming. Your time is now. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What I'm about to reveal will explain why your life has felt like a battlefield when others seem to coast through their days untouched by the kind of warfare you've endured. This isn't just about you. It never was. You've been carrying the weight of generations on your shoulders, and you didn't even know it. That depression that visits you at 3 a.m., that anxiety that grips your chest when you should be at peace, that pattern of struggle that seems to follow your family like a shadow. You thought it was personal. You thought you were broken. You thought something was wrong with you. But what if I told you that you were chosen specifically because you could carry what others in your bloodline couldn't? What if the very pain you've endured, the battles you've fought, the cycles you've witnessed, were never meant to destroy you, but to prepare you for the most sacred assignment of your lifetime? You are not the victim of your family's history. You are the divine interruption heaven sent to rewrite it. Look back at your family tree. How many generations of addiction have haunted your lineage? How many decades of poverty, abuse, mental illness, broken marriages, and spiritual darkness have been passed down like some cursed inheritance? How many of your ancestors went to their graves carrying shame, defeat, and the bitter taste of dreams that died before they could breathe? Your grandmother probably prayed through tears, begging God to break the chains that bound her children. Your grandfather might have worked himself to death trying to outrun the demons that chased his father. Generation after generation, the pattern repeated. The cycle strengthened, the curse deepened, until you were born into that bloodline not by accident, but by divine appointment. The enemy saw what heaven was planning and launched his attack early. That's why the warfare came to your house before you even understood what war was. That's why you felt different from your siblings. That's why you carried burdens that weren't even yours to carry. Hell knew that if you ever woke up to who you really are, if you ever discovered the authority flowing through your spiritual DNA, if you ever understood that you carry the power to break what has been binding your family for decades, his reign of terror over your lineage would be over. Listen to what the prophet Isaiah declared in chapter 61, verse 4. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. That's you. You are the rebuilder of ancient ruins. You are the restorer of what has been devastated. The addiction that destroyed your father, it stops with you. The poverty that humiliated your mother, it ends with you. The silence that suffocated your grandparents, you are the voice that breaks it. But here's what will shock you to your core. Every betrayal you've endured was preparing you for this moment. Every rejection you faced was teaching you to trust God alone. Every door that slammed shut was protecting you from settling for less than your destiny. Think about Joseph. His own brothers threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. For 13 years, it looked like his life was over. But Genesis 50-20 reveals the divine strategy. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph's betrayal became his family's salvation. His pain became their provision. His rejection became their redemption. Your story is the same. Every tear you've cried in secret was watering the ground for your family's freedom. Every night you stayed on your knees interceding for people who hurt you was building an altar of deliverance that will impact generations you'll never meet. You've been wondering why the weight feels so heavy, why your prayers seem to carry more urgency than others, why you can't just live a simple, quiet life like everyone else. It's because you're not everyone else. You're the one heaven chose to stand in the gap. You're the one anointed to say, "No more. This ends with me." The curse stopped with you. The chain ends with you. You were chosen to carry not just your deliverance, but your family's freedom. Right now, in the spiritual realm, every ancestor who ever prayed for breakthrough is standing in the cloud of witnesses, watching, waiting, believing that this is the generation when everything changes. Every grandmother who wept over wayward children, every grandfather who carried shame he couldn't shake, every mother who buried dreams too soon, they're all looking at you with hope in their eyes, knowing that their prayers weren't wasted. They were preparing the way for you. But here's the urgency burning in my spirit. This assignment comes with an expiration date. There are windows of opportunity that don't stay open forever. There are breakthrough moments that, if missed, may not come again in your lifetime. You feel that stirring in your chest right now because heaven is confirming what I'm speaking over your life. You're not just surviving your family's dysfunction, you're the key to their transformation. You're not just healing from generational trauma, you're the one who stops it from passing to the next generation. Your children will rise because you chose to break what tried to break you. Your grandchildren will walk in freedom because you paid the price for their liberty. Your great-grandchildren will inherit blessing instead of bondage because you decided that the cycle of defeat ends with your generation. If you feel this weight, if you recognize yourself in these words, if something deep inside you is confirming that this is your calling, then don't stay silent. Declare it now. Say it out loud. I am the chain breaker. It ends with me. But understanding your assignment is only the beginning. Because now that you know why the battle has been so intense, you need to understand what weapons heaven has placed in your hands to win it. But the numbers, chosen one, the numbers you've been seeing everywhere, you thought it was coincidence, didn't you? You wake up at 3:33 a.m. and tell yourself it's just insomnia. You glance at the clock and it reads 11:11, and you dismiss it as chance. Your receipt totals $7.77, and you shrug it off as random. Stop lying to yourself. Heaven doesn't speak in coincidences. God doesn't operate in accidents. Every number that catches your eye, every repeated sequence that makes you pause, every digital sign that seems to follow you, these are not glitches in the matrix. They are God's fingerprints pressed into the fabric of your daily existence. You want to know why your life has felt so heavy, why the spiritual warfare has been so intense. Look at the numbers. They've been screaming your identity at you for years, but you've been too distracted, too wounded, too convinced of your own ordinariness to listen. In Revelation 7-4, John writes, "Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel, 144,000, the sealed ones, the marked ones, the chosen remnant who would stand when others fall." Have you been seeing 144 in addresses, in phone numbers, in the strangest places? That's not your imagination running wild, that's heaven confirming your spiritual passport. You are among the sealed. But it goes deeper, doesn't it? The number 444 has been stalking you like a divine detective. You see it on license plates while you're praying about direction. It appears on billboards when you're questioning your calling. It shows up in the most impossible moments when your faith hangs by a thread. Listen to what Scripture reveals in Malachi 3:3. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. The number 444 is heaven's receipt for your refining process. Every trial that should have broken you instead burned away your dross. You didn't just survive the fire, you were transformed in it. And then there's 777, O chosen one. When this number appears in your path, heaven is declaring divine completion over your life. Genesis 2:2 tells us God finished his work on the seventh day and rested. But your 777 isn't about rest, it's about alignment. When you see this number, it's God's way of saying your spiritual positioning is perfect, your timing is precise, your assignment is active. But here's where it gets personal. Here's where heaven stops whispering and starts shouting. You've been seeing these numbers during your darkest moments, haven't you? When you felt most forgotten, most abandoned, most convinced that God had moved on without you, that's precisely when the signs intensified. Why? Because heaven was sending emergency signals to a soul under attack. The enemy knows what those numbers mean. He recognizes the divine coding system. That's why he's worked overtime to convince you they're meaningless. Because if you ever truly understood that heaven has been dropping prophetic breadcrumbs along your path, marking your journey, confirming your calling, you'd stop questioning your worth and start walking in your authority. Think about Daniel, locked in a lion's den for exactly one night, not 2 nights, not 3-1. The precision of God's timing saved his life and established his testimony. Your numbers work the same way. They mark divine timing, spiritual seasons, prophetic appointments that are scheduled in heaven's calendar with your name written in eternal ink. But I need to tell you something that's going to shake you to your core. The very fact that you're seeing these numbers is proof that you're being watched, not by the government, not by technology, by angels. Psalm 91:11 declares, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." Those numbers are angelic breadcrumbs, heavenly GPS coordinates, spiritual mile markers on a journey that was mapped before time began. You want evidence? Look at your life. Count the times you should have died but didn't. Calculate the moments you should have lost your mind but somehow held on. Add up the doors that closed in your face, only to reveal they were protecting you from disaster. The mathematics of your survival doesn't compute in the natural realm, it only makes sense in the supernatural. Every 111 you catch is God saying, pay attention. Every 222 is heaven declaring alignment is coming. Every 555 reminds you that change is not only inevitable, it's imminent. These aren't fortune cookie philosophies. These are coded communications from the throne room of the Almighty. The dreams, the whispers you hear at night when the house is quiet and your spirit is raw, these are not accidents either. They are confirmations. While your mind sleeps, your spirit stays awake, receiving downloads from heaven's database. That recurring dream about flying, that's your soul remembering it was never meant to crawl. That vision of standing before multitudes, that's a preview of your destiny, not a fantasy of your ego. Heaven has been leaving you a trail of prophetic breadcrumbs, and tonight you're finally seeing the pattern. The isolation that felt like punishment was actually preparation. The rejection that felt like abandonment was actually divine redirection. The numbers, the signs, the whispers, the dreams, they've all been pointing to this moment when you finally realize you are not random, you are marked, you are tracked, you are treasured. Mark your awakening. Type 777 inch the comments right now. Declare your alignment with heaven's timing. Because when you acknowledge the signs, heaven records your agreement. And once heaven has your signature on the divine contract, watch how quickly everything in your life shifts into supernatural order. The numbers don't lie, chosen one. And neither does your calling. You know what breaks my heart, chosen one? It's when I meet someone who's survived what should have killed them, and they call it luck. When I see someone who walked away from that car crash without a scratch, and they say it was chance. When I watch someone pull back from the edge of giving up at the exact moment hope arrived, and they think it was coincidence. No, beloved. It was war. While you were sleeping, while you were weeping, while you were wondering if God had forgotten your address, there was a battle raging around you that your natural eyes could never see. Angels, not the soft-winged cherubs of greeting cards, but warriors of fire, soldiers of the Most High, have been stationed around your life like an invisible fortress. Psalm 91:11 declares with thunderous authority, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." Command, not suggest, not request. Command. The Creator of the universe issued military orders concerning your protection. Think back, dear one. Think back to that night in 1987 when you almost didn't make it home. The roads were slick with rain, visibility near zero, and something you couldn't explain what made you slow down just seconds before that 18-wheeler ran the red light. You told yourself it was instinct, but what if I told you it was an angel's hand on your steering wheel? Remember that phone call you almost made? The one that would have destroyed your marriage, your family, your legacy. Your finger hovered over those numbers, but something stopped you. A peace you couldn't name. A stillness that felt like a whisper. That wasn't your conscience, chosen one. That was your angelic escort stepping between you and devastation. How many nights did you stand at your bedroom window at 2 a.m., staring into the darkness, feeling so alone you thought about ending the pain forever? How many times did you hold those pills in your trembling hands, convinced that nobody would miss you? But then something shifted in the room. A presence, a warmth, a voice without words that said, "Not tonight, not on my watch." You attributed it to strength you didn't know you had. But strength comes from somewhere, beloved, and yours came from warriors who never sleep, never leave their post, never abandon their assignment. The enemy has been trying to take you out since you drew your first breath. That childhood illness that the doctors said should have been fatal, that financial collapse that should have left you homeless, that betrayal that should have broken your spirit beyond repair. Each time hell sent its assassins, each time heaven sent its defenders. Right now, as I speak these words, there are angels standing in the four corners of the room where you're listening, not because you're perfect, not because you've earned it, but because you're marked. You carry something so precious, so powerful, so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness that heaven assigned a battalion to your protection. You thought it was luck when that drunk driver missed your car by inches. It wasn't luck. It was a warrior angel, redirecting 2 tons of steel and metal away from God's chosen vessel. You thought it was coincidence when that job interview fell through, saving you from a company that would collapse 6 months later. It wasn't coincidence, it was divine intelligence, guiding your steps away from destruction. The nights you cried yourself to sleep, feeling abandoned and forgotten, angels were weeping with you, their swords drawn against every spirit of suicide, every demon of despair that tried to convince you your story was over. When you whispered, "I can't take any more," they whispered back, "You don't have to. We're here." You've been walking through a war zone, beloved, thinking you were alone, but you've never been alone. Not for 1 second, not for 1 heartbeat. When you stumbled, they caught you. When you wandered, they redirected you. When hell came after you with everything it had, they stood between you and the flames. This isn't mythology. This isn't wishful thinking. This is biblical reality. 2 Kings 6:17 records the moment when Elisha's servant saw the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding them. What was invisible became visible. What was hidden was revealed, and dear one, the same army that protected Elisha surrounds you right now. You want to know why you're still here, why you survived what others didn't, why you made it through the valley of the shadow of death without being consumed? Because heaven refuses to let you fall. Because your angelic escort has orders from the throne room of God himself. Guard them, guide them. Don't let hell touch what I've anointed. Say this aloud right now, don't just think it. Declare it with the authority of someone who knows they're covered. I am protected, I am escorted, I am surrounded by fire. Because that's not hope, chosen one, that's fact. That's your reality. That's the truth that will change how you walk, how you sleep, how you face tomorrow. But here's what your angelic escort is preparing you for next. A revelation so profound, so earth-shattering, that even the angels themselves are holding their breath in anticipation. Listen to me, chosen one. Do you hear that sound? That's the ticking of heaven's clock. And it's not marking time, it's marking moments. Divine moments that don't come twice. Divine windows that open once, then shut forever. How many nights have you laid awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling time slip through your fingers like sand? How many mornings have you woken up wondering if you've missed your moment? How many years have you whispered into the darkness, God, am I too late? The fear that haunts every senior heart isn't death, it's insignificance. It's the terror that your story ends with, what if instead of I did? It's the crushing weight of believing your best days are behind you, while your deepest calling still burns in your chest like unfinished business. But here's what hell never wanted you to understand. You weren't born with an expiration date on your purpose. Think about Esther. A young woman, yes, but her story teaches us something profound about divine timing. Mordecai didn't say, "You're too young for such a time as this." He said, "For such a time as this." Not yesterday's time, not tomorrow's time. This time, your time. Right now, you've been measuring your life by the wrong calendar. You've been counting years when God counts moments. You've been calculating age when heaven calculates readiness. Moses was 80 when God called him to his greatest assignment. 80. When the world would have put him in a rocking chair, God put a staff in his hand and said, "Now we begin." But here's the urgent truth that's burning in my spirit tonight. There are divine windows opening right now over your life. Windows that have been sealed for decades. Windows that hell hoped would stay closed until you were too tired to climb through them. But God is saying, the window opens now, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances align. Now, Habakkuk 2-3 declares, "Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." Did you catch that? It will not delay. When God's appointed time arrives, it doesn't wait for your permission. It doesn't wait for your confidence. It moves with or without your cooperation. How many more Christmases will you spend making the same resolutions? How many more New Years will you promise yourself, this is the year, only to watch December arrive with nothing changed? How many more family gatherings will you sit through, smiling and nodding, while your soul screams that you were meant for more than small talk and fading photographs? The clock isn't just ticking, it's thundering. And every tick is heaven saying, move, speak, rise, obey. You feel it, don't you? That restlessness that won't let you rest. That stirring that wakes you at 3 a.m. with dreams you can't quite remember but can't quite forget. That's not insomnia. That's invitation. That's not anxiety. That's anticipation. Your spirit recognizes what your mind hasn't accepted yet. Your appointed time has arrived. But here's what will shock you. The enemy's greatest strategy against seniors isn't temptation. It's delay. It's the whisper that says, you have time. It's the lie that tomorrow will be easier than today. It's the deception that God's calling comes with a snooze button. There is no snooze button on destiny. Sarah waited 90 years for Isaac. But when God's time came, she conceived and delivered exactly on schedule. Not a day early, not a day late. Divine timing doesn't run on human clocks, but when it strikes with precision that will leave you breathless. You've been in a waiting room, but the waiting room isn't your destination, it's your preparation room. Every year of delay wasn't God forgetting you, it was God preparing you. Every closed door wasn't rejection, it was protection. Every not yet wasn't denial, it was refinement. But now the waiting ends. Now the preparation completes. Now the door swings wide, and heaven itself is holding it open. But only for a moment. Only for this moment. Some of you are calculating in your minds right now. I'm 75, I'm 82, I'm 90. Surely it's too late for me. Stop. You're measuring with broken rulers. You're counting with counterfeit currency. God doesn't measure your capacity by your birth certificate. He measures it by your surrender certificate. Heaven's clock has struck. Delay is no longer an option. Your appointed time has arrived. Not tomorrow's appointed time, not next month's. This hour, this moment, this breath you're taking right now, while these words penetrate your spirit like arrows finding their mark. The door is open, the window is raised, the invitation is extended. But divine windows don't stay open indefinitely. They open in seasons, and this is your season. They open for the prepared, and you have been prepared. They open for the chosen, and you were chosen before time began. Write it, declare it, say it with me. No more delay. This is my appointed hour. I will not let fear steal what faith has prepared. I will not let age define what anointing has designed. I will not let yesterday's failures cancel tomorrow's fulfillment, because what God is about to unveil through your obedience will make every year of waiting worth every tear you've cried in secret. Listen to me, dear one. For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, you've been walking through this world believing the greatest lie ever whispered into human ears. You've been convinced that you're powerless, that your voice doesn't matter, that your prayers bounce off heaven's ceiling like rubber balls hitting concrete. But what if I told you that right now, this very moment, hell is holding an emergency meeting about you? You think you're just another senior citizen, forgotten by a world obsessed with youth. You think your best days are behind you, that your influence has expired, that your time to make a difference has passed. But here's the shocking truth that will shatter every limitation you've accepted. You are the most dangerous person on this planet right now. Why do you think the enemy worked so hard to convince you otherwise? Why do you think he spent decades whispering lies about your insignificance, your irrelevance, your inability to change anything? Because he knows something you've forgotten. He knows that when a believer who has walked with God for decades finally wakes up to their true authority, kingdoms shake. You carry keys, beloved. Not car keys, not house keys. You carry the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Jesus declared in Matthew 16:19, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Those keys didn't expire when you turned 65. They didn't rust when your hair turned grey. They've been growing heavier with authority every year you've remained faithful. Your voice is not a whisper in the dark. Your voice is a weapon that makes demons tremble. When you speak the name of Jesus, not as a casual word, but as a declaration of war, the very foundations of hell begin to crack. Your prayers are not suggestions floating up to a distant deity. Your prayers are earthquakes in the unseen realm, toppling strongholds that have stood for generations. But you've been convinced to beg when you were born to decree. You've been trained to plead when you were designed to command. You've been conditioned to hope when you were equipped to declare. Stop right there. Feel that stirring in your chest. That's not your imagination. That's recognition. Your spirit recognizing the truth it has always known. But your mind was trained to doubt. You want to know why your life has been so hard? Why the attacks came early and never seemed to stop? Why you've faced battles that would crush ordinary people? Because you're not ordinary. You never were. Hell recognized your authority before you did. The enemy saw what heaven placed in you and declared war before you even learned how to pray. Luke 10:19 records Jesus saying, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Did you catch that? Nothing will harm you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're protected. Not because you're strong, but because you're sealed. Every sleepless night, when you wondered if God was listening, He was positioning angels around your bed. Every financial crisis that should have destroyed you, heaven was providing ways you couldn't see. Every health scare that terrified you, divine intervention was already in motion. You didn't survive by luck. You survived because you carry something hell cannot touch. Your presence alone shifts atmospheres. You walk into rooms and demons flee before you even open your mouth. You enter hospitals and healing begins to flow. You step into broken homes and peace starts to settle. You think it's coincidence, but it's authority. It's the same power that raised Christ from the dead, now living and active in your mortal body. But here's where it gets dangerous for the kingdom of darkness. You're not just carrying authority, you're finally waking up to it. And when a 70-year-old saint who has been tested by fire finally understands that their prayers are not whispers but earthquakes, when they realize their voice doesn't beg but decrees, when they comprehend that their presence doesn't plead but commands, that's when hell panics. You think your age makes you weak. Your age makes you lethal. Every wrinkle on your face is a badge of battle survived. Every gray hair is a crown of wisdom earned. Every slow step is the measured walk of someone who knows exactly where they're going and exactly who sent them. Hell knows your name. It's been spoken in their war rooms. Your prayers have been intercepted. Your worship has been monitored. Your faithfulness has been reported. But heaven confirms your crown. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a victor over your enemy. Say it aloud right now. I walk in authority. I do not beg. I decree. Feel that power rising in your chest. That's not emotion. That's activation. That's the authority Jesus purchased with his blood beginning to flow through your spirit like liquid fire. You are not powerless. You are not voiceless. You are not finished. You are just getting started, and what's about to be unleashed through your awakened authority will make hell wish they had never targeted you in the first place. But there's something even more shocking about your true identity that we must uncover next. Beloved chosen one, as we reach the end of this sacred journey together, I need you to carry these eternal truths with you like treasures in your heart. Remember this. You are not an accident of biology or a product of chance. You were chosen before the foundation of the world, marked with divine purpose, and equipped with authority that hell cannot revoke. The struggles you've endured were not punishments, they were preparation. Every tear, every trial, every moment when you felt forgotten was heaven refining you for this very hour. Remember that your age is not your limitation, it's your qualification. Your scars are not your shame, they're your credentials. Your voice is not a whisper, it's a weapon. And your presence is not powerless, it's an earthquake in the spiritual realm. But more than anything, remember this. You are never, ever walking this path alone. The same God who parted the Red Sea is still working miracles in your life today. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is living and moving within you right now. He has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you, and he has not finished with you. In fact, your greatest chapter may still be unwritten. You have a community here, thousands of believers who understand your journey because they're walking it too. We're not just viewers on a screen, we're family in the spirit. We see your struggle, we understand your weight, and we're ready to stand with you in prayer. You don't have to carry your burdens alone anymore. Let me ask you this final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. Now that you know who you really are, a chosen vessel, an anointed warrior, a carrier of heaven's authority, how will you walk differently tomorrow morning when you wake up? Before I release you into your destiny, I want to place my hand on your shoulder through these words and pray over your life with the authority of 5 decades, walking with the Almighty. Heavenly Father, I lift up every precious soul who has heard this word tonight. Lord, you see them, not just their struggles, but their strength, not just their pain, but their potential, not just their scars, but their sacred calling. Father, breathe fresh wind into their weary bones. Where they feel depleted, restore them. Where they feel forgotten, remind them of their worth. Where they feel powerless, awaken the authority you've placed within them. Let them feel your presence right now, surrounding them like a warm embrace, reminding them that they are loved beyond measure. God, open doors that no man can shut. Provide resources they haven't even thought to ask for. Send divine connections that will accelerate their purpose. Give them dreams and visions that will clarify their next steps. Surround them with people who see their value and will walk alongside them. Heal their bodies, Lord. Strengthen what is weak, restore what is broken, and renew their youth like the eagles. Give them energy for the tasks ahead and peace for the journey. Most importantly, Father, let them never doubt again that they are chosen, they are loved, and they are never alone. In Jesus' mighty name, Amen. I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share what God spoke to your heart tonight. What shifted in your spirit? What are you believing Him for in this new season? Don't hold back. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you need prayer for something specific, ask. This community will surround you with intercession. If this message touched your soul, please share it with someone who needs to hear these words. There's someone in your life right now who feels forgotten, powerless, or past their prime. They need to know they're chosen too. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Your faithfulness to listen speaks volumes about your heart and your hunger for God. If this is your first time here, welcome to the family. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of believers who gather here regularly to be encouraged, equipped, and empowered for kingdom living. Remember, chosen one, you are marked, you are mighty, and your mission is far from over. Walk in the authority of who you are. Until we meet again, may the peace of God that surpasses all understanding guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. You are loved, you are chosen, and you are never, ever alone. God bless you mightily, warrior. Your finest hour awaits.